The story, of course, is the rise of China. Never before have so many people risen so far, so fast, on so many different dimensions. The challenge is the impact of China's rise, the discombobulation this will cause the United States and the international order of which the U.S. has been the principal architect and guardian. The past 100 years have been what historians now call an American century. Americans have become accustomed to their place at the top of every pecking order. So the very idea of another country that could be as big and strong as the U.S. or bigger strikes many Americans as an assault on who they are. 40 years ago, 1978, China sets out on its march to the market. At that point, what percentage of China's 1 billion citizens were struggling to survive on less than $2 a day? 90. 9 out of every 10 on less than $2 a day. 2018, 40 years later, fewer than 1 in 100 today. And China's president has promised that within the next 3 years, those last tens of millions will have been raised up above that threshold. So it's a miracle, actually, in our lifetime. Hard to believe. A nation that didn't even appear on any of the international league tables 25 years ago has soared to rival and in some areas surpass the United States. A seemingly unstoppable rising China, accelerating towards an apparently immovable ruling U.S., on course for what could be the grandest collision in history. To help us get our minds around this challenge, I'm going to introduce you to a great thinker. I'm going to present a big idea, and I'm going to pose a most consequential question. So the great thinker is Thucydides. He was the father and founder of history. He wrote the first ever history book. It's titled The History of the Peloponnesian War, about the war in Greece 2,500 years ago. Thucydides wrote famously, "It was the rise of Athens and the fear that this instilled in Sparta that made the war inevitable." So the rise of one, the reaction of the other, create a toxic cocktail of pride, arrogance, paranoia that drug them both to war. Which brings me to the big idea, Thucydides' trap. Thucydides' trap is a term I coined several years ago to make vivid Thucydides' insight. Thucydides' trap is the dangerous dynamic that occurs when a rising power threatens to displace a ruling power, like Athens, or Germany 100 years ago, or China today, and their impact on Sparta, or Great Britain 100 years ago, or the U.S. today. Once you get this idea, this concept of Thucydides' trap in your head, it'll provide a lens for helping you look through the news and noise of the day to understand what's actually going on. The most ambitious and most competent leader on the international stage today is China's President Xi Jinping. As he said when he became president 6 years ago, his goal is to make China great again. A banner he raised long before Donald Trump picked up a version of this. By 2025, China means to be the dominant power in the major market in 10 leading technologies, including driverless cars, robots, artificial intelligence, quantum computing. By 2035, China means to be the innovation leader across all the advanced technologies. And by 2049, which is the 100th anniversary of the founding of the People's Republic, China means to be unambiguously number one. So these are audacious goals, but as you can see, China's already well on its way to these objectives. Who will feel the impact of this rise of China most directly? Obviously, the current number one. As China gets bigger and stronger and richer, technologically more advanced, it'll inevitably bump up against American positions and prerogatives. Now, for red-blooded Americans, there's something wrong with this picture. Okay? The USA means number one. That's who we are. But again, to repeat, brute facts are hard to ignore. As late as 2004, China was just half our size. By 2014, its GDP was equal to ours. And on the current trajectory, by 2024, it'll be half again larger. The consequences of this tectonic change will be felt everywhere. Which brings us back to our Greek historian. Harvard's Thucydides trap case file has reviewed the last 500 years of history and found 16 cases in which a rising power threatened to displace a ruling power. 12 of these ended in war. And the tragedy of this is that in very few of these did either of the protagonists won a war. Few of these wars were initiated by either the rising power or the ruling power. So how does this work? What happens is a third party's provocation forces one or the other to react, and that sets in motion a spiral which drags the two somewhere they don't want to go. Remember World War I. The provocation in that case was the assassination of a second-level figure, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, which then led the Austro-Hungarian emperor to issue an ultimatum to Serbia. They dragged in the various allies. Within 2 months, all of Europe was at war. Are Americans and Chinese going to let the forces of history drive us to a war that would be catastrophic for both? Or can we summon the imagination and courage to find a way to survive together, to share the leadership in the 21st century? The good news is that leaders are increasingly aware of this Thucydidean dynamic and the dangers that it poses. The bad news is that nobody has a feasible plan for escaping history as usual.